Hari Om, Radhe Krishna. Coming to the 9th verse of the second chapter of Srimad Bhagavad Gita, very important verse where Arjuna is asking so many questions and everything is clarified in this to some extent. So the verse goes like this. Sanjaya uvacha eva muktva rishikesham gudakesha parantapaha नयोत्स्य इति गोविन्दम् उक्त्वा तूष्णीं बभूवः. Sanjaya Uvacha said, Parantapaha, the scorcher of foes, Udakeshaha Arjuna, Rishikesham to Lord Krishna, Evam in this manner, Uktva, having spoken, Nayotsya, I shall not fight. Iti, thus, Govindam to Govinda Lord Krishna, Uktva saying, Tushneem, silent, Babhuva became, Ha indeed. Sanjaya said, having spoken to Lord Krishna in this manner, Arjuna, the scorcher of foes, said, I shall not fight. Speaking thus, he became silent. With these words, Sanjaya informed Dhritarashtra of the most recent events on the battlefield as he had been asked to do. Wanting Lord Krishna to teach him Shreyas, Arjuna had said, I am your Shishya. Please teach me. Arjuna seems to know the profundity of the word Shreyas, a word mentioned often in the Shastra. In the Katha Upanishad, there is a story about a young boy, Nachiketas, who went to Lord Yama, the Lord of Death, and received 3 boons. He encashed the first boon in favor of his father, who was angry with him. For the second boon, he asked to be taught the ritual for gaining heaven. This boon too was for the sake of others. Lord Yama granted Nachiketas both of these boons. The third boon Nachiketas encashed for himself. He wanted to know whether there was a self, an Atma, other than the body, because some people said there was and some others said there was not. He told Lord Yama that he wanted to be taught about this Atma and that there was no one more qualified to do it than Lord Yama. At first, Lord Yama discouraged him, but finally he decided to teach Nachiketas. Lord Yama told Nachiketas that there were always 2 things available to a human being, Shreyas and Preyas. Shreyas is chosen by one who is wise, a Viveki, whereas everyone else generally chooses Preyas, prosperity and pleasure, Artha and Kama. Dharma also comes under Preyas. Shreyas, on the other hand, is moksha, liberation, the freedom brought about by self-knowledge. Nachiketas asked Lord Yama for this Shreyas. Because Shreyas can be used in both a relative and an absolute sense, it is important to know what it was that Arjuna was asking for. Whatever Arjuna wanted it or not, Lord Krishna understood Arjuna's request only in terms of absolute Shreyas and not in the ordinary sense. The absolute meaning of Shreyas is absolute goodness, that which is good for me, good for you, good for everyone at any time and place. That which was good for Arjuna was equally good for Duryodhana, if only he had ears for it. If Duryodhana had said to Lord Krishna, I am your Shishya, please teach me, and if Lord Krishna had considered Duryodhana a qualified student, he would have taught him in the same way. Whenever and to whomever Shreyas is taught, it is always taught the same way because it is knowledge, jnanam. From Krishna's point of view, then the Shreyas Arjuna asked for was this knowledge, which is moksha. In the wake of knowledge, there is no sorrow, because this is the teaching of the Bhagavad Gita from beginning to end. The Bhagavad Gita is Moksha Sastra, a body of teaching meant to destroy sorrow, shoka. Knowledge is something that cannot be personal, although it has to be gained by a person. Any knowledge, is always true to the nature of the object of knowledge. It is not something that is centered on your personal will, but on this object of knowledge itself. For example, if the object is a flower, it's a flower. There is no choice in knowing it as anything other than a flower. If there is something more to know about the flower, then you can know its botanical name, which includes its family and so on. Whatever more you come to know about the flower is always jnanam, because knowledge is always as true as the object. It is not determined by one's will. Therefore, knowledge of a thing is not going to differ from person to person. So, Lord Krishna is explaining about relative shreyas. Usually, what is good for you at a given time is not good for you at another time. For example, a particular drug may be a cure for your illness, even though it's also a poison. Thus, what is good for you at one time is not good for you at another time. Also, a certain medicine may be good for only one problem and not for any other. Or the drug that treats your problem may not be good for someone else with the same problem because of the other person's allergic reaction to it. This kind of goodness is what is meant by relative goodness, and something that is not always applicable the same way. It keeps on changing. Something that is good is determined by place, desha, time, kala, and situation, nimitta. Even ethics and values, dharma shastra, which we generally consider as absolute, have to be interpreted from time to time. Because dharma shastra is to be interpreted, it cannot be considered absolutely good. Swamiji coming to the explanation of absolute shreyas. Swamiji is telling, if there is something that is absolutely good, it must be something that does not change at any time and is always the same for any person. That is what is meant by shreyas here. Arjuna's sorrow led him to ask for this shreyas, and Lord Krishna understood what he wanted as absolute shreyas. Absolute shreyas, called moksha, is the complete acceptance of oneself. Self-acceptance implies a self that is already acceptable. If I am not acceptable to myself, positive thinking cannot give me self-acceptance. The self is unfolded in the Bhagavad Gita as already acceptable, along with whom it is acceptable and how it is free from all limitations. The one who is happy with oneself has nothing more to do. Such a person is one who has checked off all the items to be completed, to be fulfilled, that are on the list. He or she is a free person. Throughout the Bhagavad Gita, we are told that the self is acceptable and that this acceptable self alone is what everyone is seeking in life. When Duryodhana wanted the kingdom, he wanted only self-acceptance. He wanted to see himself as a person who was acceptable to himself. Without a kingdom, he could not see himself in this way. Therefore, he wanted the kingdom. In the process, of course, he had conflicts. He was cavilled at by many people, and he had wronged so many people. How could he be acceptable to himself under such circumstances? You should be acceptable without a kingdom, without any addition, without even the physical body and its condition. Only then can you accept yourself. If the body is something on the basis of which you have self-acceptance, you are in trouble because the body will change. It's not going to remain the same. The self might have been acceptable yesterday, but not today because the body has picked up a problem. The body is time bound. It is subject to change and it keeps changing. Therefore, in the morning it's acceptable and in the evening it is not. We find then that if the self depends on any one factor for its acceptability, it's not an acceptable self at all. The self by itself, in its own glory, should be acceptable to you, for which it has to be free from any limitation whatsoever. So, which is very important. The highlighting point, Swamiji says that we should remove all limitations, infinite. You are unlimited. You have no boundaries. You are a free person. That is the recognition Swami is telling. So we are not bound by anything, any object, any situation, any circumstances. That's what the highlighting factor is. The self is the whole. Therefore, there is nothing other than the self, really speaking. This vision is unfolded in the Bhagavad Gita in such verses as all beings exist in me and I do not exist in them. Matsyani sarva bhutani nachaham teshva vashtitah teshvavastitah, and in me there are no beings, nacha masthani bhutani. This means that while I do not depend on any one of them, they all depend upon me. This is the vision of the whole unfolded in the Shastras as the meaning of the word Shreyas. Shreyas is you until it is gained. Shreyas is an end, as it were. Once gained, it is not separate from you. It is you alone. You are the Shreyas. Arjuna asked for it and he got it. If Arjuna had wanted ordinary Shreyas, he would not have told Lord Krishna that he was his Shishya, nor would he have told him that he was surrendering to him. All of this indicated that Arjuna wanted to gain absolute Shreyas at this particular stage of his life. Having surrendered to Lord Krishna, Arjuna left everything up to him. Lord Krishna then had to decide whether he would teach Arjuna or merely urge him to stop blabbering and fight. Fortunately, Lord Krishna taught him. Had he opted not to, we would not have the Bhagavad Gita. So this is the most highlighting point. So Arjuna understood what is Shreyas, and Lord Krishna will further tell him further highlighting points. We'll continue in the next session. Hari Om, Radhe Krishna, Radhe Krishna. Hari Om, Radhe Krishna. Coming to the 9th verse of the 2nd chapter of Srimad Bhagavad Gita, we are continuing. Lord Krishna was explaining to Arjuna about Shreyas and prayers. So continuing with Shreyas, Lord Krishna says to Arjuna, this Shreyas is you. That is the absolute unlimited self. Until it is gained, Shreyas is an end, as it were. Once gained, it is not separate from you. It is you alone. You are the infinite, you are the ultimate, you are the unlimited. So everything, Lord Krishna is telling Arjuna, you are the Shreyas. Arjuna asked for it and he got it. If Arjuna had wanted ordinary Shreyas, he would not have told Lord Krishna that he was his Shishya, nor would he have told him that he was surrendering to him. All of this indicated that Arjuna wanted to gain absolute Shreyas at this particular stage of his life. Having surrendered to Lord Krishna, Arjuna left everything up to him. Lord Krishna then had to decide whether he would teach Arjuna or merely urge him to stop blabbering and fight. Fortunately, Lord Krishna taught him. Had he opted not to, we would not have got the Bhagavad Gita. So another point, Arjuna was attracted to sannyasa. So in asking that Lord Krishna teaches him, there was a prayer, a surrender in Arjuna that calmed the storm within him. When there is a doubt or indecision, the mind is restless. So when the mind is restless, when it's not calm, so we won't have the discrimination or the viveka to what to follow. So that's why these prayers help us to always have a calm mind. When there is a possibility of a solution or a decision is made, then the mind is quietened. There is definitely restlessness when there is a conflict between dharma and adharma. In Arjuna's mind, there was a conflict between right and wrong, dharma and adharma, and there was also the emotion of sympathy leading to his sorrow. Affections being involved, his mind was in an even greater state of confusion than it would have been had he merely been concerned about his duty. Only duty means he would not have he would not had so much problem as it was emotion was taking over him. The problem and the confusion started, Lord Krishna says. Arjuna's confusion naturally led to a certain sadness. Lord Krishna was a good listener, and perhaps the two verses wherein he tried to wipe Arjuna into action also helped to trigger Arjuna's thinking. While trying to prove to Lord Krishna that he was not frightened, Arjuna had to tell him that he could not handle this particular situation. He now saw himself as someone who was not as dispassionate as he was expected to be. Arjuna concluded he would be better off living a life of alms, a lifestyle mentioned in the Shastra for a sadhu, a person who has given up the pursuit of all desires. The life of a sadhu is meant purely for a pursuit of knowledge, jnanam, and is free from all social, national, religious, or other family obligations. As a sannyasi, you are a competitor in the society. You do not have a job, nor are you interested in any of the afterworlds like heaven and so on. Self knowledge is pursued to the exclusion of all else. The sannyasi, respected by the society, has a life lived on alms, bhiksha. The Vedic society has a value for this lifestyle, and it is one of the 4 stages, ashramas, of a person's life. Sannyasa was exactly what Arjuna had in mind. He thought that a life of bhiksha would mean sannyasa, and he talked about it constantly. He knew that sannyasa was meant for jnana, moksha, and that it was not for securities and pleasures, artha, kama, and dharma. His own father was abdicated in the throne to go to the forest for this pursuit alone. A tropical problem becomes a fundamental problem, Lord Krishna says. Having lived in the forest, Arjuna had met many great people, Mahatmas. What a period it was! Even though some Duryodanas were there, it was an excellent era. Certainly, it is a rare privilege to have as one's contemporaries people like Vyasa and Shuka, Bhishma and Vidura and Balarama. Although Arjuna had lived in such times, he had been a prince with his own predominant desires and ambitions. Naturally, he had not been committed to the pursuit of moksha, even though he had access to it. He knew all about Shreyas, but now the time had come for him to pursue it. When Arjuna had first come to fight, he had no conflict whatsoever. All he wanted to know was with whom he would be fighting. Even when he saw his own people on both sides, his conflict was fairly simple. Should I fight? How can I fight my own people? But then, as he thought about it, he became completely unnerved, believing that he was committing some kind of self destruction. What had started out as a simple conflict had now gained a different proportion altogether. A simple topical problem has become a fundamental problem. This can happen to anyone. A time comes when death draws our attention and we ask, what is this death? Perhaps the Buddha thought he had to be a monk in order to find an answer. He was a prince and had not seen death or anyone who was crippled. Or perhaps, since such events had not touched him personally, he had simply not paid any attention to them. Only when he began noticing them did the big question hit him. There is no there is so much sorrow and pain in life. Can there be a solution? Having asked this question, it is said that he left the palace in search of the answer. When you go off in search of truth, you do not carry a trunk load of belongings with you. Because he was interested only in truth, he just walked out. So Lord Krishna is telling to Arjuna, see what is the message is very important. The basis for sorrow, Swamiji is highlighting. Similarly, seeing simple pain, there is an empathy that turns into something else because a question has been triggered. In fact, all problems in life are connected to those that are much more basic, the basic problems being inherent in ordinary small problems. The small sorrows and pains which are mental in nature have their basis in the co-personality. One who is angry becomes angry, and one who is not angry does not. Similarly, only the sad becomes sad. In order to determine why you are sad, a psychiatrist may take you into regression, back into a period of time when you picked up various notions about yourself and the world. In this way, your neurosis is accounted for, which is psychology. There is a co-personality which is psychologically transferable by an informed specialist. Tracking back, however, in itself is not enough. One more step has to be taken, a step that is psychologically fundamental. That I am a mortal, that I am a subject to sorrow, that I have to prove myself. No psychologist says is improper thinking. In fact, they all agree that you should get angry if the situation wants it. Cry it out, don't suppress it, they say. The teaching, however, says we must take one more step because there is a more basic problem that must be addressed. Because I am subject to sorrow is a basic problem. There is something more basic about you which you had better known. Any small problem can be traced if you ask a few more questions. Inevitably, you will come to appreciate that there is a basic problem if you ask the question, I am really sad. You end up reading the Bhagavad Gita because Bhagavad Gita is the answer. The answer is not something you can figure out because if you are sad, you are sad. It is something that must be recognized. To ask what is the basis of sadness means that it is something to be understood and not a particular condition or experience. The experiences of both happiness and sorrow have always been there, the one alternating with the other. Now I am sad, now I am happy. It seems, therefore, that happiness is a visitor and sadness is the person. You have to understand whether the self is subject to sorrow, what sorrow is, and so on. There is a whole gamut of questions involved here. A simple frown by someone which triggered off some small pain in me can be traced to a fundamental self-ignorance and self-confusion, or at least a self-question, I am seeing myself rightly. This kind of questioning is called Atma Vichara and is what happened in Arjuna's mind. Therefore, he told Lord Krishna that he was his Shishya and he wanted Shreyas. If you think the battlefield is not a good place for us to be, then just drive the chariot. Think the battlefield, then just drive the chariot somewhere else. Do whatever you like. I have handed over the horses and chariot to you. Arjuna says to Krishna, you decide. If you want a quiet place, drive to a quiet place, and if you think you can teach in this din and roar, then I also can listen. I don't mind. Leaving everything to Bhagavan, Arjuna became quiet. Arjuna's surrender. Not only had Arjuna handed over his horses and chariot to Lord Krishna, but also his life, having found the possibility of a solution to his problem in the form of Shreyas and in the form of Lord Krishna's teaching, Arjuna became silent. The storm in his mind had blown over. Although it was not enlightened, his mind was at least silent with some hope. Even though the storm was over, Arjuna was still overcome with an intense inner torpor. Where did it come from? He had been so enthusiastic, armed, and ready to fight. But now, right in the middle of the battlefield, his sorrow was so much that his eyes glistened with tears. When you are in sorrow, you are present as a whole person. In fact, sorrow cannot come unless you are there as a whole person. Some people have a feeling of deadness due to some emotional problem, and in order to relieve it, to feel alive, they work themselves into sorrow. Only then do they feel that they exist. Only then is there some reality for them. Artists sometimes have this problem. They feel dull and think they should be either aesthetic or in pain. They say the pain produces music on some other art form, but it's not the pain that does it. It is because a whole person comes out of the pain and then something is produced. The result of such pain that becomes someone else's pain or their joy, perhaps, depending on the product. Similarly, Arjuna became a whole person because a storm had occurred. There was now no chance of sleep or any other expression of his stupor, only silence. Having found this possibility of a solution, there was a lull in his mind now that the storm had blown over. What a silence it was. So Arjuna was prepared to further hear from Lord Krishna. We see in the next session. Hari Om, Radhe Krishna, Radhe Krishna. Hari Om, Radhe Krishna. Coming to the continuing the 11th verse of the second chapter of Srimad Bhagavad Gita, Swamiji is referring that sorrow is not reasonable. Arjuna is told that you are grieved for no reason. You have entertained grief with reference to situations which do not demand any grief on your part. Bhishma and Dronacharya can take care of themselves. You need not have any grief on their behalf or for any other reason. If you understand everything from the standpoint of Atma, there is no sorrow. From any other standpoint also, sorrow is not very reasonable. It's not that Arjuna was advised to have no sorrow. Such advice would not have been proper. Therefore, we should not say that we should not be sad because the Gita says so. Nor does the Shastra say that it is not proper to be sad. It says there is no reason for sadness, meaning that sorrow is something to be inquired into and understood. So we have to understand sorrow is the state of mind we create. Without that situation, mind will react, but then we should not be sorrowful. We have to face it and handle it properly. That's what Swamiji is advising every one of us. Swamiji says about two orders of reality. The Bhagavad Gita says that we have entertained grief for which there is no reason, because neither the Atma nor Anatma is the source of sorrow. This statement must then be proved, which the Gita Shastra does by revealing that Atma, whose nature is fullness, Ananda Swarupa, cannot be affected by Anatma, Mithya, because the very existence of Anatma depends on Atma, Satya, the truth of everything. The Atma then is not going to be affected by Mithya, just as the imaginary snake you see on the rope cannot affect the rope. If the rope is wet, it is wet, but it has not been made so by the slimness of the snake we are seeing on top of it. The Atma is not anatomically affected by anything that has been superimposed upon it. Therefore, the basis, the adhisthana, satya, is not affected by mithya. So, Swamiji is highlighting that what is truth, what is satya, if you understand, then we also understand what is mithya, what is unreal. Mithya depends upon the Atma for its existence and sustenance. For its fuel, its very, its very fibers of being. The only thing that could affect Atma would be something enjoying the same order of reality. When two entities belonging to the same order of reality, such as the father-in-law and the son-in-law, cannot come together in a relationship, the dependency of one will affect the other. The son-in-law doesn't have a job and he finds it necessary to move in with his father-in-law. The son-in-law's dependency will definitely affect the father-in-law. This dependence is entirely different and it's not what is under discussion here. So you have to be properly understand. Swamiji is giving this just example to make us understand what the whole truth is. What we are discussing is Atma being Satya and Anatma being Mithya. Just as the Swarupa of water is not affected by the wave, the Swarupa of the Atma, Satchit Ananda, is not affected by Anatma. This subject matter is discussed throughout the Gita, starting with this verse. Even though the verse starts with a negative particle, none, it's not an improper beginning because the whole Bhagavad Gita is Nivritti Atmaka. Before beginning the Bhagavad Gita, Vyasa saluted the goddess of knowledge, Saraswati, and he started the first chapter with the word Dhritarashtraha, meaning the one who sustains the entire universe. Dhritarashtraha. In this way, prayer for an auspicious beginning was well taken care of, nothing more was required. To begin the teaching with the statement, "There is no room for sorrow," so he did in this verse, is therefore a very effective beginning, even though a negative particle was used. Coming to the 12th verse of the second chapter of Srimad Bhagavad Gita, Natvevaham jatu nasam natvam neme janadhipaha nachaiva na bhavishyamaha sarve vayamatah param. Word meaning: aham, I, jatu, ever, natu, asam, did not exist, iti, na, eva, not indeed, evam, you, na, asihi, did not exist, iti, na, not, ime, these, janadipa, kings, na, asanam, did not exist, iti, na, not, atah, param, hereafter, sarve, all, vayam, we, na bhavishyamaha, shall not exist, cha, and, iti, na, eva, not at all. There was never a time when I did not exist, nor you, nor these kings, nor will any of us cease to exist in the future. If all these people are going to die, how can it be said that they do not cause sorrow for the bereaved? Surely, since they are going to die, they must be a cause of sorrows, even though who are not on the battlefield are sochas, because they too are eventually going to die. Addressing this doubt, Lord Krishna shifted the discussion to the vision of Atma. His statements were not meant as an argument to kill, but rather to provide an understanding of dharma, so that what was to be done could be done. Since Arjuna also wanted absolute shreyas, Lord Krishna talked about the nature of Atma. He said, "There is no time that I did not exist." To say that I did not exist at some time is not true. I always existed. Lord Krishna was obviously, therefore, not an ordinary person. He was said to be an avatara. He could say, "I always existed." Could the same thing he said of a jiva like Arjuna? Lord Krishna said, that you did not exist before is also not true. You also always existed. Being a prince, Arjuna was also not an ordinary person. Lord Krishna therefore went on to say that all of the stalwarts standing before them on the battlefield, leaders of the people, chieftains, commander-in-chief, and all the other soldiers had also always existed. What Lord Krishna was saying in this verse is that all of us are eternal. I was there before, and you were there before, as were all these other people. In his vision, they were all there before. The next question would be, what about later? We might have existed before, but we might not exist later. Will there be a time in the future when I am not? Lord Krishna said, no. Thereafter, the destruction of the body, you will continue to exist. Lord Krishna says birth and death in terms of the vision Swamiji is highlighting. We have a concept that everyone is born, and we even have a horoscope to prove it. We know that we were born at a given time and take this to mean that there was a time when we were not. This is a very well entrenched notion about the I, that I was born, that I am getting old, that I am going to die, and so on. If you are born, you will naturally get old. The notion that you are getting old is going to be there as long as you think you are born. In the vision of the Bhagavad Gita, there is no such thing as birth for you. Atma, I am, is not born. The notion that I am born is negated here by using double negatives. That we celebrate the birthday of Lord Krishna does not confirm the non-existence of Lord Krishna before. It only confirms that on this particular day, in this particular form, Nama Rupa, Lord Krishna was born. To say that he was born in this Nama Rupa is correct and creates no problem. But to say that Lord Krishna was not there before, despite what people might think, is not true. Therefore, Lord Krishna was not really born. He was as though born. Lord Krishna went on to say that it is also not true to think that you were not there before. There was no time that you were not there. Lord Krishna told Arjuna that he too essentially was timeless, and that everyone else was as eternal, as existent as Lord Krishna was. Similarly, we always think that we will not exist later. A conscience that is cause for lamentation. A conclusion that is cause for lamentation. This notion is also not true. Lord Krishna said, whatever form you take yourself to be, you definitely exist. As an individual jiva or atma, you definitely exist. Jiva tattva, individuality, may not exist later, but as atma you will always exist. Because the jivatva goes when a person is enlightened, only atma is meant to be taken there. To this sense, then Lord Krishna said to Arjuna, there was never a time when I was not. There was never a time when you were not. Nor was there ever a time when all these leaders were not. Similarly, there will never be a time when all of us will not be. Does this mean then that this family found will not continue forever because all these atmas are going to be eternally there? No. The use of the plural here was only with reference to forms, upadhis. There was never a time when we were not there, nor will there ever be a time when we will not be there. Using pots and pot space as an example, the pots will come and go, but all the pot spaces will always be there because there is only one space. The words used in this verse, I, aham, you, tvam, we, vayam, kings, janadipa, are all with reference to the bodies seemingly enclosing one Atma, like many pots enclosing one space. So that is the highlighting factor in this verse. Further, we'll continue in the next session. Hari Om, Radhe Krishna, Radhe Krishna. Hari Om, Radhe Krishna. Coming to the Bhagavad Gita, 2nd chapter, 13th verse. Dehinosmin yata dehe kaumaram yauvanam jara taya tata dehantara praptihi dhirastatra namuhyati. Yatha, just as dehinaha, for the embodied, for an individual, asmin dehe, in this body, kaumaram, childhood, yauvanam, youth, jara, old age, tatha, so also dehantara praptihi, the gaining of another body, tatra, there, with reference to that, dhiraha, a wise person, na mukhyati, is not diluted. Just as for an individual there is in his body childhood, youth and old age, so too the gaining of another body. With reference to that, a wise person does not come to grief. Where does a person, the jiva, exist? Swamiji says, the jiva, the one who makes the body conscious, is the indweller of this body. In other words, the jiva is Atma with a body, mind and senses. In this verse, Lord Krishna referred to the threefold states that the body undergoes, each of which is distinct from the other two. So the very important factor, the consistency of the Atma. At each state comes and goes, the I remains the same. So all the states are different, but the common factor I remains the same. Although each state is destroyed, the Atma is never destroyed. The body is said to undergo a metamorphosis every 7 years, but the person remains the same. The birth of a later state does not imply a new birth and a new life for the person, the Atma, nor does death of the previous state spell death for the Atma. These states come and go, and Atma remains the same in a given body. The same Atma sees all the three states, childhood, adulthood and old age. Childhood, adulthood and old age. One need only ask an elderly person what he or she had for lunch. In response to this simple question, an elderly man may start with his first marriage. The Atma is the same throughout all the experiences of life. Swamiji is telling different experiences which a man undergoes. Just as each of these states is taken for the Atma, another body can also be taken for the Atma, even though Atma itself remains the same. In the same way, as a person does not remember his or her first 3 years, previous lifetimes in other bodies are also not remembered, which is just as well, since there would only be that many more problems. If we all knew our own and each other's previous births, we would be blaming people from those lifetimes just as we do in this one. There would then be far more many situations and people to blame. Known or unknown, Atma is the same, but be it with reference to the first 3 years of this birth or to previous births. Thus, from the standpoint of Atma, there is no reason for sorrow born of self-decimation. It is the same even from the standpoint of the simple jiva, the one who has a body. Where is the reason then for getting into a state of delusion that I'll be absent at any time? The jiva will continue with or without a body. Without a body, there is no problem. I am Atma and therefore timeless. As a jiva, gaining a new body gives you a new and better start. If you did not make proper use of the previous body, you can make use of the new one. The wise have no sorrow, Swamiji says. Because a wise person has the knowledge of Atma and Anatma, there is no question of he or she becoming sorrowful. Such a person knows that what does not change cannot be changed, and what changes cannot be stopped. When the facts are clear, there is no sorrow. The wise person is the one who knows what is real, Atma, and what is unreal, Anatma. Further, Lord Krishna says in the 14th verse of the second chapter of Srimad Bhagavad Gita, Matra sparshastu kaunteya shitoshna sukha dukkhadaha agama apayino nityaha tam stitikshasva bharata. Kaunteya, O son of Kunti, Arjuna, Matra sparshaha, the sense organs contacts with the sensory world. Tu, indeed, Sita Usna Sukha Shitoshna Sukha Dukkhadaha give rise to cold and heat, pleasure and pain. Agama Painaha, coming and going. Anityaha, not constant. Bharata, O descendant of Bharata. Arjuna, Tat, then Titikshasva, endure. The sense organs contacts with the sensory world give rise to cold and heat, pleasure and pain. O son of Kunti, they come and go. They are not constant. Endure them, O descendant of Bharata. Given that the Atma never dies, that is always survives, as Lord Krishna said, it seems that the sorrow caused by the death of a person is not reasonable and therefore not very legitimate. That there may be no sorrow for the person who knows the Atma to be eternal and the Anatma to be non-eternal is also possible. But in this life, sorrow does not occur because of certain changes that take place. Situations do not go your way all the time. We do not call all the shots. Things keep changing, some of them favorably and many of them not so favorably. Some situations are pleasant, others unpleasant. That which is pleasant does not last, while the unpleasant seems to stick to us most of the time. There is therefore both pleasure, sukha, and pain, dukkha, in that the pleasant arrives and must pass away for the unpleasant to come. For instance, people begin. So many examples Swamiji gives about heat, cold, when the seasons change. The sorrow is not due to Atma going and coming, but purely because of the situational context. This being the case, is there not a legitimate sorrow? Sense organs and their objects. Swamiji explains about that, what Lord Krishna wants to tell us all. Lord Krishna talked here about the nature of the sense organs and the sensory world. The sense organs contact sense objects, matras sparshastu, that is, they come into contact to give us the experience of cold, heat, pleasure, pain, etc. The knowledge that something is cold or hot produces a response that is pleasant, sukha, or this is unpleasant, dukkha. Cold can be either pleasant or unpleasant, and so can anything hot. So there are different situations Swamiji is trying to explain. We find that there is a uniformity in our responses and also to a certain extent a universality. The world is one of the opposites, heat and cold for example, and these opposites give us pleasure and pain, sukha and dukkha. Categorically, we may say that certain situations make us happy, and certain situations are not. All this at the same time, however, there are people who want rain so much that they are praying for it. Therefore, the rain you do not want, someone else may be praying for. So the situations and the people vary. That's what Swamiji is highlighting. These then are our responses which seem to give rise to sukha and dukkha, all due to contact of the sense organs with their objects. One may argue that if contacting heat and cold give rise to sorrow, perhaps we should avoid contact with sense objects. But how can we? Lord Krishna did not say we have to avoid the contacts. We need only understand them. Most of our problems are like this. They only need to be understood. What is to be understood here is that coming and going is the nature of opposites. heat and cold, pleasant and unpleasant, and so on, and that this nature does not change. If we keep on saying it is hot, a time will come when the heat will go. Similarly, when the cold. Therefore, they are not constant. They do not remain for us to complain about. Even if we want them to stay, they will not. They are always in flux, constantly changing. We cannot totally remove ourselves from the opposites or remove them from us. This is not to say that one should not make an attempt to improve a situation. But if things must always be present for us, Lord Krishna was making it very clear here that they will not be, because things are both pleasant and unpleasant. They are not always going to be as we want, nor are they always going to be unpleasant either. Physical pain and sorrow. If death is said to be incapable of causing you sorrow, where does that leave all the other situations and seems to make us unhappy? The world can cause us some physical pain because the physical body belongs to the physical world. One physical entity can therefore hurt another. Arjuna's problem is not physical. It is purely sorrow, shoka, and shoka is a type of thinking. Where physical pain is something to be endured and cured, sorrow is something we built on. Physical pain is not something that is totally avoidable. The body is subject to pain and will be affected by one force or the other, the sun, rain, winter, and so on. We can protect the body to the extent possible, but because it is anitya, constantly changing, it is subject to pain. This is the body's nature. Sorrow, on the other hand, Swamiji says, is something we built on to the pain because of a particular way of thinking. This is exactly what we have to change cognitively. Therefore, Lord Krishna said, take every situation as it comes. Arjuna, cheerfully in your stand with a sense of humor. Lord Krishna later told Arjuna how these opposites cannot really do anything to us because by nature they have no independent existence apart from ourselves, the Atma. There is some kind of lumping that occurs due to a confusion between orders of reality. The mind, senses, and body have a similar realities, whereas the Atma is another order of reality. When we say we are sad, the Atma, I, is involved in the sadness as though Atma belongs to the same order of reality as the mind. So, which it does not. In this way, the Atma is taken to be the Anatma and it becomes one among the many. Because the Anatmas in the world are too many and so varied also, we cannot cope with them all, even though they are all Anatma. Even so, let alone the more. So it is the order of reality we have to clearly understand. If the Atma is really one among the many, nothing can be done. However, the vision is that the Atma is unlike any of them. Sorrow is not possible without Atma, I. Every time there is sorrow, it because Atma is somehow involved. Mere mind with its thought processes cannot create sorrow. So ignorance is the cause for imputing sorrow to Atma. So ignorance is the main cause. The coming and going of the opposite is a fact. Thus, when Lord Krishna told Arjuna, endure them titikshasva, he was not just offering advice, he was being objective. Why the need for this objectivity? Because situations are constantly changing, the pleasant as well as the unpleasant. To think that only good situations pass away is improper thinking. What then is there to worry about for a person who is objective, who has a certain appreciation for what the world and its situations are all about? There is no reason for sorrow, Lord Krishna says. There are just situations to face and act upon, whether inner or outer. There is nothing to be sad about. That's what Swamiji is highlighting in this verse. Further, we'll continue in the next session. Hari Om,
Hari Om, Radhe Krishna. Coming to the 15th verse of the second chapter of Srimad Bhagavad Gita. 15th verse. Yam hina vyatayantyete purusham purusharishabha samadukha sukham ghoram somritatvaya kalpate. Purusharishabha, Arjuna, prominent among men. Ete, these two, Sukha and Dukha, Samadukha Sukham, the same in pleasure and pain. Dhiram, one who is discriminating. Yam, to whom. Purusham, person. Na, not. Vyatayante, do not affect. Saha, he. Hey, indeed. Amritatvaya, for gaining liberation. Moksha. Kalpate, is fit. O prominent among men, the person whom these do not affect, who is the same in pleasure and pain, and one who is discriminative is fit for gaining liberation. So Swamiji wants to highlight that a person who sees equanimity in pleasure and pain, sukha and dukkha, labha, gain and loss for everything, cold and heat, everything he is having a same equanimity in situations and in facing them, that person is fit for gaining liberation. For him it's easy to, he becomes a sattvic person, he wins over rajas and tamas, so he's fit for gaining liberation. That's what Swamiji is highlighting. In this verse, Krishna addressed Arjuna as Purusha Rishabha, whose literal meaning is O bull, Rishabha among men. Among large herds of cattle, it's always the stud bull that stands out because of its size and the big hump on its back. Just as a bull cannot be missed among hundreds of cows, so too Arjuna stood out as the most exalted of men. Even those who did not know who Arjuna was would have acknowledged him because of his brilliance, Tejas. He was a man of great accomplishment and a highly recognized person in the society. So he was addressed as Purusha Rishabha, the most prominent among men. So for gaining liberation, so how to develop sattvic qualities, which is very important. So in every action we have to analyze that. A discriminative person remains the same with reference to the opposites. Pleasant and unpleasant situation do not affect the person. Such a person is aware of their coming and going, of their constantly changing nature. In the Bhashya, Adi Shankara made it clear that this was not just as a matter of practicality. A wise person knows the subject as Atma, one who cannot be affected by any situation. Such a person is called Dhira, meaning one who is discriminating, one who has the knowledge of the Nitya Atma. The word Pandita, used in an earlier verse, is replaced here by the word Dhira, meaning one who is not affected by the opposites and who therefore gains moksha, amritatva. Amritatva means being subject to mortality, whereas amritatva is to be free from mortality. Knowing the Atma as the one that is Nitya, the wise gains moksha. Swamiji says, one who is discriminative, who accepts situations happily, and who does not allow himself or herself to be swayed by either pleasant or unpleasant situations, is one who is fit for self-knowledge or who already has this knowledge. So Lord Krishna obviously wanted to make this fact very clear at the outset. Coming to the 16th verse of the second chapter, Na satho vidyate bhavaha, na bhavo vidyate satah, ubhayorapi drishtontah, tvanayostvatvadarshibhi. Astaha, for the unreal, bhavaha, being, na, not, vidyate, is, satah, for the real, api, also, abhavaha, no, being, na, not, vidyate, is, tattvadarshibihi, by the knowers of the truth, tu, indeed, anayo, of these two, ubhayor, both, antaha, the ultimate truth, dhiraha, drishtaha, is seen. For the unreal there is never any being, for the real there is never non-being. The ultimate truth of both of these is seen by the knower of the truth. This is a very peculiar important verse. For the asat, a word we shall use as it is. There is no being, bhavaha. In other words, being is not there for the asat, and for the sat there is no non-being. In the second line of the verse, Lord Krishna went on to say that this fact is known by those people who know the ultimate truth about sat and asat. The first line is the crux of the verse. Asat means something that does not exist independently, and Sat is what exists independently of anything else. What is it that exists independently? Cold and heat, for example, do not because they depend upon a number of factors. There is no absolute cold existing by itself. That something is cold depends upon something else. The temperature cannot reveal itself to you by itself unless you have a perception. Therefore, our perception is essential in order to understand that something is cold and something else is hot. When we say this is a pot, does the word pot reveal an object that exists by itself, or does the object indicated by the word pot depends for its existence upon something else? If it depends on something else, clay, because of which the pot is there and unto which it will go back, that clay becomes the cause, karana, for the pot. The word pot has no real object outside of the word itself. It has no existence apart from clay. That which has a cause, that which depends upon something for its existence, that which does not independently exist is called asat. Lord Shankara explained asat further. When we try to prove the existence of things that are dependent upon causes for their existence, such as cold and heat, or any given object, we find there is no self-existent thing at all among the objects of the world. Why? Because what is there is only a form, vikara, that keeps changing. It is never the same, nor it can be the same. It's called as Vyabhicharati. Lord Adi Shankara went on to prove a point here. Suppose all pots are made of clay, but we have the knowledge of only one pot. We know it is clay. If we know the truth, Satya, the cause karana of all pots to be non-dual clay, regardless of what form any or all pots assume, we know that they are nothing but this is only one clay. By knowing that one clay, we know all pots in the sense that they are not separate from the clay. Although this is general knowledge, it is the knowledge of the whole. What is a pot then? It's purely a name for a form. Other than this, there is no pot that exists separately from clay, nor is the clay the pot. If it were, again we would not need to make the pot, the clay being there already. Therefore, the clay is not the pot. If we remove the clay, where is the pot? Is it anywhere? Is it something that we have to search for? No. All that is there for the name pot is a form recognized as such. Anything that is time bound like a pot will change, and we cannot stop it because its nature is to keep on changing. When and how are we going to stop it? Therefore, we are crying for what? We are sad for what? Are we sad for something eternal because it is eternal? No. Sat is that which never changes. It has no non-existence, abhava, at all. Sat is never everything else. Sat is never negated at any time, whereas Asat never enjoys a being of its own. Therefore, Sat cannot create any sorrow for us, and Asat is incapable of doing so because it does not exist in its own right. How can Asat create sorrow? In the vision of the Veda, we are the Sat and everything else is Asat. Asat cannot be a source of sorrow to Sat, and Sat cannot be a source of sorrow to us because it is we. The whole problem is one of confusion between Sat and Asat, Atma and Anatma. Asat has no being, no bhava, it has no existence, thus it cannot be bhava that which exists in all three periods of time. A thing that exists is bhava, and abhava is a thing that does not exist. The word bhava coming from the root bhu, used in the sense of existence, analysis of existence and non-existence. Tuchha is another word for abhava and refers to certain combinations that do not exist at all. For example, man's horn does not exist. Horn exists and man exists. Both are bhava, both exist. From these words, there are objects in the world which I know exist, but when I combine the two, man's horn, there is no such thing. Does the word asat in the verse means tuchha, non-existence? No, because it's unnecessary to say that something that is non-existence has no being. In some modern commentaries, however, we do find asat being transliterated as and equated to non-existence. What purpose is served by this sentence? The non-existent man's horn has no existence, none. That which we refer to as asat is between satya bhava and tuchha. There is an abhava between these two, a non-existence that we call asat. For instance, we cannot dismiss the sense organs and sense objects as non-existent, tuchha. Are they then sat? Let us analyze them. A sense organ cannot be called a sense organ unless it perceives something. Eyes are a sense organ only because they see a form. Ears are a sense organ because they hear a sound. And the senses of smell, taste and touch are called sense organs because they contact their sense objects. How can we call eyes a sense organ if they don't see? If ears don't hear, there is no sense organ even though the ear lobes may be used for earrings or for catching hold of someone. The earlobes, etc., are just the anatomical aspect of the senses called hearing. It's hearing that makes the ears as a sense organ, and there is no such thing as sound without the ears, which establishes what? To establish the existence of one, we need to establish the existence of the other. When establishing the existence of either depends on establishing the existence of the other, there must be some other basis for the existence of both. Thus, all of them depend on something that is self-existent called Sat. Because we cannot dismiss the sense organs and their sense objects as non-existent, we say they are Asat. They are not totally abhava. The sense organs and the sense objects do exist. All the responses of pleasure and pain, sukha and dukkha, are there. We cannot dismiss them as non-existence, nor can we take them as independently existent. Therefore, for something that cannot be dismissed as non-existent, tuchha, and cannot be taken as independently existent, sat, we have to have a word, and that word is asat. Another word for asat is mithya. Asat or mithya is that which has no bhava, that which depends upon sat. Only when there is sat is asat possible. Therefore, mithya or asat is something which exists, depends upon another thing, and because it has no independent existence, it is not separate from that upon which it depends. So we will conclude here and we'll continue in the next session. Hari Om, Radhe Krishna, Radhe Krishna. Hari Om, Radhe Krishna. Coming to the 17th verse of the second chapter of Srimad Bhagavad Gita. Avinashi tu tad vidhi ena sarvamidam tatam vinashamavyayasyasya na kaschit kartumarhati. The meaning of the verse is, know that to be imperishable, by which the entire existence is pervaded. None can cause the destruction of the indestructible. So, Swamiji is trying to explain our concerns about protecting the earth, the space, and the species are based on the ignorance of the Supreme Intelligence, which is the seed for everything and pervades the whole show, the entire world tree. The word idam means this,
or that which is seen. It represents all beings, places, events, and thoughts. This is indeed pervades by the immensity of the seer, the illumining principle. The substratum pervades all superimposed names, forms, emotions, and thoughts. As thread pervades the cloth, the entire manifestation, the world, is pervaded by Brahman, says the Upanishad. So, what he is highlighting is the thought, the emotions, the actions, everything Lord is present. That's why when I was earlier explained also, we should go deep into it. For example, this by God's grace and the Guru's grace, which we did, is also the gratitude which Guru has shown us. If we have deep bhakti to the Lord from the day one when they are born, automatically Lord shows our Guru, he shows the direction, and he comes in the form of a Guru and guides us. That is, if we have deep devotion, deep liking to know the ultimate truth, who is mumukshu, who is very keen in knowing the Lord. For that person, Lord Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, and Swamiji also refers, Lord Krishna says to Arjuna, the main thing, being in the material world also, every action you have to be dedicated to the Lord. That attitude. So automatically this total surrender comes, then he takes over. We are just the instrument in the divine hands. So that attitude in every thought, every action, every emotion, that's why from the morning till evening, every thought has to be analyzed. In one of the lectures I was hearing, a person who is straightforward and honest throughout his life from the day one, means with awareness he does the action, he can understand the whole world. Lord shows him in every action beforehand itself the consequences, the direction, everything comes, because the whole universe is his. Selfless love we have towards everything, every being, that's what he's highlighting. Every form, every emotion, every being. Like a cloth, like a thread pervades the cloth, the whole universe is pervaded by that truth, that Brahman, which is we, the human being. We that Atma, the ultimate truth to be known, is only by human being. That's why this human birth is so precious, so sacred. We have got how to utilize that. That's what Swamiji is highlighting. The idam, the universe, is nothing but God, Ishvara. The Upanishad says, what is seen as this is nothing but the Atma. In the Vishnu Sahasranama also, the very first name is Vishwam. This Vishwam or universe is Vishnu. If we can look at the idam as Vishnu, our sadhana is fulfilled. Arjuna was given this vision by Bhagavan later on. Lord Krishna makes him understand. That's why the vision is very important. When I'm giving the explaining by whatever Swamiji has said, we all have to do that homework, which is very, very important. At the end of the day and the beginning of the day, we will see the difference when the years pass by. We become aware, we become clear, we become in our actions with clarity, we do with focus, with schedule, with love, with compassion, with unconditional love, with humility, humbleness. All this is very, very important, because totally we have to surrender our ego. Then only these points can make us, the Saraswati Kataksham comes and makes our thoughts so clear that the vision becomes clearer and clearer and clearer. So every thought only we have to analyze and negate the unwanted thought. As the slate, as the mirror is so clean, our chittam has to be very, very clean. That's what Swamiji is highlighting. So the Vishwam, so Lord says to Arjuna also the same thing. The world, the people, their loves and hates, their knowledge and ignorance, their desires, war, peace, all happen like a movie on the screen. So everything is the two sides of the coin. So both will face in the world, but how to face it is very important. Even in the difficult period, if we have the awareness, every problem has a solution. That is how we face it, how we look into it with love, without hatred. Everything happens because of our own karma. So we can't blame any person, any situation, any event. So with this, Bhagavad Gita explains that every karma, the past, the present, the future, is dependent on every individual. We can't say anybody in the family or in the society, because the situations will be like that. Each one is having their own karmas. So when it comes to to face, so we have to face it cheerfully with understanding. That is more important, because this knowledge will guide us. This knowledge will guide us and it will place us in such a situation that we are not affected. That is the greatness of the Lord. That is the greatness what Lord Krishna is trying to explain. So Ananya, the inexhaustible, the changeless universe. What is referring is the Atma, which is changeless, where other material things go on changing. In the universe, all are created, sustained, and subsumed by that Avyaya Vishnu. He is the supreme intelligence. In one moment, he can conjure up any number of scientists and supply them with either creative or destructive knowledge. So in this universe, we have both the knowledge. It is how we use our free will and try to understand the whole universe. What Swamiji is highlighting is the source can never be found outside. It is within us. Although he pervades the entire creation, to find him we must go within and seek him in the inner the thought. That is, we have to go inwards, not search outside. That's what he is highlighting. The Atma Tattva, with that awareness, try to search inward. That is within me, that is conscience, which guides that Atma Swarupa. That truth is within, so we have to travel inward. So outside world really guides us and shows us the path. The creation which is referred to here as Idam is pervaded in every cell, every atom. Anoraniyam Mahato Mahiyam. From the smallest to the biggest, everywhere the Lord pervades. So once we know this, our mind turns inward and our vision changes. Creation, destruction, etc., all like waves in the infinite ocean of existence. Ananta is one of the names of the Lord. The Creator, the created, and the creation. The Sustainer, the sustained, and the sustenance. The Destroyer, the destroyed, and the destruction are all He, is all He. So everything is Lord. That is the highlighting factor. Existence can be classified as two principles. One is Aham, the I, and other is Idam, this. I is the Swayam Prakasha, self-luminous. The Idam is seen only by the light of the Aham. Hence the entire field is pervaded by the presence, the effulgence of the Aham, pure consciousness. That is very important. I am that light that is reflected outside. Further I'll explain in the next class. Hari Om, Radhe Krishna, Radhe Krishna.